Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I'm doing my picks for the final week of the Overwatch League Spring Stage Qualifiers here in the Western Region. There are a grand total of 12 games this weekend, so a lot to dive into and talk about. So let's go and jump in and start with the very first matchup, which is going to be the London Spitfire taking on the Los Angeles Gladiators. It's an interesting matchup. I think the Gladiators are the clear-cut kind of favorite in this match. They're very, very good. They're one of the top teams in the league for sure. And there's a lot of reason to think that they should be the one to find victory in this game. I think they've been playing well. They do have a bit of a tougher matchup at the kind of last game of the weekend for them, but I think they're better right now. Spitfire have not inspired much confidence in me at all. I think they look pretty weak. They look pretty poor. And so I'm going to take the Gladiators to take this one by a score of 3-1. They've just played a lot better, like significantly better, honestly. And I think when you look at this team in general, there's pretty good reason to just think that they have way more kind of high-end peaks. Even at their lowest, I still think they look to be one of the top teams in the region. So yeah, give me them taking the win over the London Spitfire. Up next, we have the Vegas Eternal going up against the Atlanta Reign. I'm just going to throw up this tweet from Owl Statsnet. You know, it kind of just explains everything in a very good way. A model that has Atlanta with a 99.99992% chance of beating Vegas, or a 1 in 1,248,089 chance of Vegas winning. Yeah, Atlanta's going to win this game 3-0. If they don't, it's a shock and it's an embarrassment, and there's really no reason why the Eternal should even compete in this match. They're just not nearly as good. It's not really worth breaking it down much further than that. Best team in the league versus the worst team in the league. Yeah, give me the Reign to take this one. Up next is an interesting matchup, one of my favorite matchups of the weekend in terms of kind of what we are going to potentially learn. That is the Washington Justice taking on the New York Excelsior. New York, a team that has been kind of up and down. We feel like they're getting better. They're building to something. We just haven't seen them do anything against some of the top level teams yet. We haven't seen them beat anybody kind of really all that good. Yes, they have wins against Vegas and they have wins against the LA Valiant, but we've seen them also lose games to some mid to low level competition like the Shock and the Defiant. They were close games, but they still ended up losing those matches. So the Justice are another one of those teams who right now we feel pretty good about them. Obviously, Justice have 3-0'd the Shock. They lost to the Boston Uprising, so they're kind of in this middle ground with the likes of Toronto and San Francisco. They've looked better than them so far. So can New York compete with this team? Can they find some success here? Could they potentially find a win in this matchup? And I just don't think so right now. I think Justice Alfie is so good. He has played so well all season. He's just looked way too good. New York looks improved. I still think they have to work on some stuff. I don't like Fitz coming in on flex support. I just don't think it's really the solution or the strategy. I think they have to really kind of reconsider what they're doing there. I just don't think it's really the thing I want to see. So I think the Justice take this one. I'm going to say a 3-1. I think New York's going to have to take a map in this series. I don't know. There's been a lot of 3-0 Overwatch recently, but I think New York should not be written off entirely in this series, but I think the Justice are just way too strong at the kind of their best looks, and I think New York is going to struggle to match that, and I think that's going to be why the Justice take a pretty one-sided win in this one. Up next is my first big pick game of the week. It is the Houston Outlaws taking on the Florida Mayhem. These two teams are fighting for that coveted free ticket to Korea for the Midseason Madness. The Outlaws currently hold that second overall spot in the Western region, and the Mayhem currently are in a tie with the Uprising for third. So it's a huge, huge game, you know. This is a huge week where if the winner of this game almost guarantees himself, not quite guarantees himself, but pretty luckily or pretty likely guarantees himself a spot in Korea for the Midseason Madness. So it's a huge game for both these teams, and I think the Outlaws are in an interesting spot. I think they've looked mortal recently. they've been running some weird compositions. They've been running some weird looks. They haven't been running as much of like the really good Winston play we normally see out of them. So I think that they've been kind of experimenting a bit and trying some different stuff out. I still think they're the better team, but if that's the kind of look they're going for, what's the reason for it? Are they trying to kind of hide some of their best looks because they want to maybe kind of keep themselves a little bit more secretive and for matches like this one against the Mayhem? It's hard to really say. The Mayhem, I have become a little more lukewarm on. I think they're still very, very good, but I wouldn't put them above the likes of the Gladiators right now. I'd put them kind of in and around teams like the Uprising and the Titans. So it's an interesting matchup. I think the Outlaws will win it. I think they are the better team here. But some of their different looks and some of their different styles have me a little bit concerned for this match. So I will say it's a close 3-2 victory for the Outlaws. I think it's a really important game for both these teams. You would much rather not have to play in the spring stage knockouts if you can avoid it. So it seems pretty clear to me that the thing that this matchup is going to be about is trying to lock up that free ride into Korea. And so I think it's a big game for both of these teams. I think both teams are going to kind of go out, really kind of show their best. And I think it's going to be a good series. So I'm going to say 3-2, but I do ultimately think the Outlaws will walk away with this one. Moving on to the next matchup, we have the Toronto Defiant taking on the London Spitfire. Defiant have been struggling a bit, though they did have a good weekend last weekend, managing to get a bit of an end to some of their struggles and some of their sliding that they were doing by managing to net wins over the Valiant and a close series against the Uprising, relatively speaking. But they seemingly are starting to figure some of their stuff out. This is a very good weekend for them. They play a Spitfire team, doesn't look very good, doesn't look super solid. I think the Defiant in a lot of places are the better team here. If you think historically, American Tornado did beat British Hurricane, which a lot of these players were on, so I think the Defiant are in a better position than they've been. I think they looked improved last week. I definitely felt better about where they were than I was when they kind of went into their bye week, where I thought they just did not look very good. They did not inspire much confidence in me. I think they look cleaner now. I think they look a little bit better, a little more polished, and I think that they should be able to take this Spitfire team down with relative ease, though I will say London takes a map, and I'll say it's a 3-1 for the Defiant. They've been better this year, not by a lot, but they need to get some wins if they want to really kind of lock up a spot. And if they win this game, they basically would eliminate the Spitfire from being able to make it into the knockouts, and it would give the Defiant a bit more of a cushion to feel a little bit safer about where they are into the knockouts. And so Defiant are the better team. I think they take this one. Up next, we have a potential banger of a match. Boston Uprising taking on the Atlanta Reign. I don't want to pick this one as a big pick game because as much as I think these are two good teams, could be a very competitive series, I don't really have much of a reason to think Boston can take down Atlanta, right? Until I see Atlanta lose more than just that game against the Gladiators in the Pro-Am, I really can't pick against the Reign in any serious capacity. So far, in the spring stage, they have a single map loss, and it was to the Houston Outlaws, who we all agree, mostly, are the second best team in the region. As good as Boston is, and I think Boston is a good team, I think Atlanta's just too good, they're too versatile. I think Boston is a little bit sloppy. I don't think they played the best Overwatch. I think that it's very possible that the Reign win the series 3-0, just because the Reign are that good. And it's not that the Uprising are bad, but the Uprising lost 3-0 to Vancouver, right? If they lost 3-0 to Vancouver, I don't think they're going to be able to beat a Reign team that just kind of looks unstoppable, and they're coming off of a bye. So they've had time to rest up a bit and kind of figure out and really polish their game. So I'm going to pick Atlanta to win this one, but I am actually going to give the Uprising a map, which is weird because, you know, a 3-1 score for the Reign would be only their second map loss this season. But that for me is more out of respect for the Uprising as a team and what they've done. I think they can take a map. I think they are a very difficult team to really just completely wipe the floor with. I think that there's certain areas that look better. They look much better when Smurf is in my opinion. But I think the Uprising are too good of a team for this to be a super, super, super one-sided affair. I think Atlanta's going to win. I think a 3-0 would be not like a huge surprise. but I still think Boston will at least make it look pretty competitive, and they'll still show decent looks in this matchup. And I think that would give Atlanta a very nice, comfortable win going into a locked-up Korea spot for the Midseason Madness. Up next, we have the San Francisco Shock against the Florida Mayhem. We saw these two teams play in the Pro-Am. The Florida Mayhem were victorious in that series 2-0. Shock don't look very good right now. The Mayhem, they look pretty good. Like I said, I'm a little more lukewarm in the Mayhem now than I was before earlier in the season. But I still think the Mayhem are the better team. I think if you look at the Shock and they're getting pushed to map 5s against teams like New York and Toronto, and they honestly didn't look great against the Valiant, I think you kind of have to figure that the Mayhem, a team that just look like they're having fun, the vibes are good, the energy's good, the team looks good. I just don't see Shock finding success there. So to me, I'm going to pick the Mayhem. I'm going to say 3-1. I think we've seen enough heroics from Proper recently that they can kind of pull a map away. I want to see them commit to Junbin. I want to see them just run Junbin as much as possible. I think less max is better. But I think we'll get a better idea of where this team stacks up if they do just stick to Junbin this week. It's a tough week for the Shock, but I want to see what they do if they just stick to one tank and it be Junbin this weekend. So they're two tough opponents. I want to see them at their best. And so I think they're good enough to take a map, but they just look so disjointed and uncoordinated, and it's hard for me to pick them. So give me 3-1 for the Mayhem. Up next, we have the Vancouver Titans taking on the Houston Outlaws. I love the Titans. I think they're a good team. I love a lot of what they've done. I love a lot of the players on this roster. I don't think they're going to be able to beat the Houston Outlaws. Houston Outlaws are so good. They are so good. I mean, they have Shu and Violet alone are just cleaning house. They're absurdly good. And I just think that it's hard to pick against them. And so I think the Outlaws take this one 3-0. No disrespect to the Titans. They're one of the teams that I think have entered into my opinion, like that serious discussion of they can beat pretty much anybody in the league. But Houston and Atlanta is where I draw the line. I don't think Vancouver can beat those teams. So Houston 3-0 in this one. Up next, we have the Toronto Defiant taking on the Vegas Eternal. A battle between two historic NA contenders rosters, American Tornado versus Odyssey. And let's be real, the Defiant are the better team. The Vegas Eternals don't look very good. I said this is a pretty good week for the Vegas or for the Toronto Defiant. They get the Eternal, they get the Spitfire. They get two teams lower than them. They can really kind of have a week of just kind of letting themselves figure out what they are, where they are, how they play, all that type of stuff. And I think when you look at this team and you look at what the Defiant are able to do well, I think they just match up better on every role than the Vegas Eternal do. Like, Kaluj is the better tank than Vulcan, solo tanking. They have the same, they're both off tanks. So give me that. The support line is, I think, better than the Defiant, though I do think it is the best part of the Eternal. But really, it's the damage diff, right? Like, Hydron alone is just going to be able to body. So give me the Defiant in a win here. It's not a surprise. Easy 3-0 for them. It's really, what more can I really say about it this time around? Next is the second and final big pick game of the week, which is the Washington Justice versus the LA Gladiators. Another matchup we saw in the Pro-Am. It was a very good match. You may remember it as the one where, kind of controversially, Mirror came in and played that final Esperanza map for the Washington Justice, and they just kind of fell apart. But the first two maps were super close, super competitive. Very possible that the Gladiators would, have lost and not qualified for the Pro-Am elimination bracket. So it's a good match, and I think right now, when you look at these teams, I think the Gladiators feel like they're in the better spot. They've beaten a lot of the teams that are close to them. The only teams they've lost to are Atlanta and Houston. They beat Florida. They beat Toronto. So in theory, this should be a really good matchup for the Gladiators. But that Pro-Am game sticks in my mind. And I think that the Justice have looked very good with the way Alpha He has played. I think Flora is on his redemption arc, which I love, because I've been defending Flora for years now. I think he's a very good player that gets kind of pushed aside sometimes. So I think it's an interesting matchup where you have a Gladiators team that I think at their best certainly can compete with a lot of the teams in the league, pretty much anybody in the league. The Justice, I don't know where they can compete, but we saw the Justice with a huge win over the Shock. Yes, they had that loss to Boston, but these are teams that are in interesting places with the kind of trajectories of their teams. They're both going up. It's a question of how much of the heroics can you get out of a player like ATVI. What looks do the Justice feel more confident on? I think they look better now than they did in the Pro-Am, which is good, but I also think the Gladiators really improved throughout the later part of that Pro-Am and into the regular season. So I think it's just a good matchup between two teams where there is still kind of an interesting kind of matchup there. It was a good match the last time we saw it. I'm excited to see it again. I am going to pick the Gladiators. I think they're the better team. I think they should be favored to win. But I'm going to say it's pretty close. I'm going to say it's a 3-2 victory for the Gladiators. I think it's really going to come down to performances by the damage players. How much can they carry? And, really that Dante versus Ben Bestamir matchup is the thing I'm looking at for the most. And it'll be fun and it'll be interesting. And I think that the Gladiators will feel pretty good this week. I think this should be a good week for them. But this, to me, is the bigger test for them this week when you look at their schedule. This is the one that I think is a little more interesting and pretty fun. So I'm excited for this one. Up next, we have the San Francisco Shock taking on the Boston Uprising. This is a very interesting matchup. I think a lot of people are down on the Boston Uprising. I feel like I'm one of the few people who are just completely on the Uprising train. I think they look very good. I think the Uprising are a very good team right now. I don't think they're the best in the league. I think that, like I said, I think they're going to lose to Atlanta. But to me, if the Shock can't beat the Justice, how are they going to beat the Uprising? And yes, that Justice game was a couple weeks ago. Time has changed, but I don't think that we have seen any real improvement from the Shock in the areas that I think they are in their weakest state, right? Will they commit to just one tank? Will they figure out some of their rotation? Will they figure out how to keep Proper and Heesang on the same role map after map? They just have so many things that I keep seeing go wrong. And as much as the Uprising, I think, have had issues at times this year, they haven't always played the cleanest Overwatch. They look more just ready. They seem to just understand the game better. They have way more veteran presence on this roster, and I think that helps them a lot. If fights start to break down, if things don't go the way you necessarily think, I feel, which feels odd to say because of the whole narrative around the Uprising so far this season, I feel like the Uprising can handle adversity better than the Shock roster can. I think the Shock roster seemingly don't enjoy playing with each other too much. I think there's a lot of reasons why that might be the case. And I look at the Shock roster, and I just think they've, in general, haven't figured out how to kind of make this team work. The Uprising just feels like a team where they know they have a bunch of talent, and they know it'll work, and they know that it may take a little bit more time than they would like it to, but this team is starting to click more and more each week, and I can't say the same about the Shock. So I'm going to say the Uprising take this one by a score of 3-1. I'm not a Shock believer right now. I picked them to win this season at the beginning of the year. I thought they would be champions, and I have no reason to believe that is true anymore. They just don't have it in them. They have not looked like a really strong team, and so give me the Uprising to win that one. Final match of the weekend is the Vancouver Titans taking on the New York Excelsior. Similar to that New York versus Washington game, this is another team where New York, if you consider the fact that they competed against the Shock and they competed against the Defiant, this is kind of the two teams in Vancouver and Washington that you kind of look at as just above that, right? They're kind of in that tier just above the Shock and the Defiant, right? So these are the teams that you want to see them compete against. You want to see them potentially find success against and want to see kind of how they play against them. And so it's a very interesting one to just look at because I think when you look across the board, you have a New York team that looks to be improving and a Washington team and a Vancouver team that are kind of dark horses. They're doing well. They're playing games well. They look pretty good. And so I want to see if New York can compete against these teams more than anything else. I don't think they can win either of these games, right? I'll be straight up. I like New York as a team. I think they have a lot of problems and a lot of things they need to work on before I'm ready to start picking them to win games outside of, say, Vegas, London, and the Valiant. But I am seeing enough from them that I think this will be an interesting series to see where they are as a litmus test, right? They're not a team that are just going to be so bad it's embarrassing or they're laughably bad or anything like that, which is kind of the thing we thought about them at times in the past. They have potential. They have the ability to do things. They just are not able to kind of execute fully every single time we see them. So this to me is just an interesting thing where they're not going to be able to compete super well against Atlanta and Houston and Boston, who just are gargantuan talents way better than them. But where is New York is really the key this weekend. But I don't think they can win, like I said. So I think it'll be a 3-1 again, like I did with their match against the Justice. I think New York can take a map off this Titans team, but the Titans are better. They look cleaner. They look more on top of things. I think they just have way more kind of synergy. They have way kind of just better understanding and positioning and just play across the board. So, yeah, I think they're going to take it, but I don't think it'll be a laughable series by any means for New York. I think they're a team that is improving week in and week out. And even if they haven't reached their peak yet or their potential yet, I think we're getting closer and closer to that every single week. So that is it for my picks this week. I'll throw them up. You can see them all on your screen if you want to look at them. But there we go. I had a very good week last week, so we'll see if it's the same this week. My recap video probably will be out a little later next week, probably Tuesday, or later in the day on Monday. I'm not sure exactly when I'll get that out, but it is going to be Memorial Day weekend here in the U.S., so a long weekend, and so I won't be around all the time this weekend to watch those matches, but I will do and see as much as I can. I'm excited to kind of see what happens. But that's it for today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, where you agree, where you disagree, whatever it may be. And if you want more videos like this in the future and you enjoyed this one, consider liking and subscribing, as your support does help out a bunch with the channel. That is going to be all for me for today. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.